talking about the implementation. Tommy, Philip, Brian, Philip, Jake. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Jake is there. So I think we should start. Okay. So it's almost time to go home, but we have a meeting to do. So welcome to the TAPS meeting. Me, Jahidujaman Sharkar, and my chair here, Aaron. So next slide. How does it work? Yeah. So not well. I think you really should read it. If you can't read that one, read it online. But this is something you'll apply to this meeting and anything you do in IETF. This is the agenda. So what we'll have this chairs update, and then we'll have and question to answer. How should we frame? Then there will be presentation on like connection pools and an implementation report from ETH, and then PI implementation of TAPS, and then we'll have Jake talking about his Yang model, a proposal to create a Yang model for TAPS, and obviously using TAPS for multicast. Any bashing we need here? Anybody has any comment? Okay. I think there's no comment. So this is the document status. So we don't have anything published since the last meeting. We have this minimum set of transport services for in-system. That's on the editor queue, RS editor queue with MISREF. We have an updated working group document. There we are surveying the transport security protocols. And there is a new draft from Jake about Yang model. It's a non-working group document. I think we have a presentation here today. So we'll see what it's about. And I think there's a good chance of having a really lively discussion at that point of time. Interim, we had an interim in January. I think it was very good. We're making very good progresses with these interims. So the topics were there, like there are some open issues that we try to solve. TAPS phase 3 proposals. There's some implementation update, like what people have been doing. And also we kind of decided to use GitHub. I have a slide for that one. We have a slide for that one, and GitHub for TAPS collaboration on the drafts, working group drafts. And I think there are like, we both talked about it, right? There was like very good progress we made during the interims. So the question is, are we up for another one? I see lots of thumbs up and head shake. So I think that's yes. So we'll have to plan one. All right.
Yeah. Let's try to carve out some time at the end of the meeting before we break to have a quick discussion on dates and maybe high-level topics. I think it's so much easier to converge on scheduling when everybody's in the room at the same time. So, Corey, do you have something to say on the topic?
Right, I shall say it anyway. Gori Fairhurst. What I'm going to say isn't related to the interim. It's related to, I would love to see the working group next time produce versions of the working group IDs halfway through the IETF cycle. So round about the point of the interim, so that more people get to work from the new versions rather than having to go to GitHub and look at them.
So as I recall, that my perception is that the interims drive the generation of an updated set of IDs before the meeting.
Yeah.
But then there's a lot of stuff that we discuss, and so I think what you're asking for is another rev after the meeting.
Yes. Rather than doing it before the meeting, doing it a few weeks after the meeting with the low-hanging fruit fixed.
Right. So you're looking at the wrong person with that request. You should be looking off to your right. Nope, other right.
Well, whatever.
Yeah.
It's us people who need to do this, not me.
Yes.
I will help.
Okay, that's I think that's a good suggestion, and we can do that, I think. So GitHub, now I think we have announced it. We have, as I said, in the last interim we decided to go for it, and then we announced this creation of new TAPS organization, and then basically we have currently one repo that's hosting all the API documents, the 3 architectures implementation documents. And then basically this is an organization. I think I should have Brian to set it up. Thanks, Brian, for the transfer you did. And I think you are also trying to set up a script, which is basically will send some daily digest. You have any update on that?
It works, and SMTP is fun.
Okay. 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 Yeah. Great.
They've received 4 other copies of the digest, which is not slides that we pass on.
Okay, but so the things are working, it seems like. So the idea there is like you'll use this organization, create repos, and then basically when we have working group documents, we'll collaborate and resolve issues there. And then the things is like the working group, we have one repo now, and we can create more repos, and when we have repo creation needed, or we chairs can do it, or we'll add all the authors actually to the organization so that they can create the repo and then push and do the changes there necessary. Then as I discussed, we get some confirmation, like we have daily digest going through the mailing list. So that's working. That's the idea. That's how you get mailing lists, get updated informations. And I think chairs and authors will look into the discussions, the issue discussions, and whenever we need some sort of consensus, that is to go to the mailing list or working group. The one question we had, like, do you think like we should also host working group materials like presentation and stuff in GitHub? That I see like other working group are doing. This is an extra work for us, perhaps. But do we see any point of doing that?
Yeah, Kulevin. So I believe, because I put a ticket in and it got resolved now, that there is an option in the data tracker now that like people can actually log in and upload their files, and chairs only have to confirm it. Because I think that was the main use for GitHub, right? That people can upload stuff automatically and then the chairs can just take it over. So maybe that's not needed anymore. But I didn't test it yet.
Okay.
That'd be awesome. I hadn't heard that. That would be great.
So I've seen people testing it like, next to me during working group meetings. So it seems to, I mean, they didn't tear their hair out or throw their laptops to the ground. So so when we've done this in IPPM, like we were basically using it for chair slides and stuff like that, right? Like so, and like the agendas, so you can like push changes to the agendas. That's been useful, but we're not being like sort of, so like Quick uses it, religiously, like all the slides go in there, and then there's like a manual process that data trackerizes things. If the data tracker does this for us, then no need to do it. I mean, you're owners of the organization. If you as the chairs decide that you want a repo to track whatever chair stuff that you want to, that, you don't want to hide from the rest of the working group, like non-secret chair stuff, then go ahead and do it, right? You don't even need the working group's approval for that. Just repos are cheap.
Yeah, so my personal opinion is this adds like more process to something that I would like to be as low process as possible. I'd
Then
like to
don't
have
do
the impedance between creating materials and presenting them to be as small as possible. And that's why the idea of having presenters upload their stuff on their own is like that, because I don't want to hassle people. I want people to be able to work on their stuff until the last minute so that it reflects the current thinking. And it seems to me that this adds overhead. But if the working group demands it, your chairs will comply and submit. But that's not what I'm hearing.
Yeah. So if anybody, last thing is like if anybody has a logo idea, it would be nice to have a TAPS logo for the organization. We're missing one, a nice one. It sounds a trumpet there. I don't know. I don't like it. And the default one.
I did upload an unnice one to the like it's on the org. Like look at the org.
Okay.
There's a logo.
Yeah, I just checked yesterday. Yeah. Did you do yesterday?
Huh? The NSA one? What? I think there's one on the org. Yeah, it looks like it's the TAPS. It's the bugle. It's shamefully lifted from the Austrian Post.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
if anyone has a better idea.
It's TAPS org. So GitHub IETF TAPS. It says that.
No.
Yeah.
says
So that's
It's not a copyright.
yeah. If you're happy about that, we're fine then. So this is the milestone. I think we're talking about the security. We have not submitted a document yet. So this is about the security. I don't know what is the status right now. What are the authors thinks about that?
What?
So
Name, please.
name.
Yeah, Kyle Rose, Ahmad.
So I think we're pretty close to done. There have been some changes recently, and I think there's some more editing that we want to do, but I think we're pretty close to working group last call. This is the question was, should we just do the edits doing working group last call? Possibly. I had a discussion with Tommy yesterday that this would be a perfect draft for a living document track, because it's the sort of thing that where new things are going to appear over time, and it would be nice to be able to just kind of keep the document updated. But since we don't have that, at some point we just have to freeze it and publish it.
So I think that's basically a strategy for the three main documents as well, that we're going to get them done. We're going to let them sit while the implementations progress. And then at some point we'll that way they'll be in sync, and then we'll pull the trigger and let them go.
Right, but this is input to those essentially, right? So this has to be frozen earlier. So anyway, I'm sort of agnostic as to whether we do the working group last call right now or not, but I don't feel strongly.
Do you think, are there empty sections that need to be written? Is this no,
So
it would be ready now to do working group last call if we wanted to do it?
Sure. Yes.
Then I would propose deferring it, because I think if we let it sit and we come back to it, we may see things that we don't see now.
I mean, I certainly don't think we have to do it in this meeting, right? We could do it on the mailing list, so.
Yeah.
Unless
Okay.
Tommy vehemently disagrees.
I mean,
Okay.
if there's a concern from like a management point of view, it would be that the authors will not be available to continue to work on it to factor in last call comments. So, I know about, but is Chris? Do we expect Chris is going to continue to be available to do this?
I mean, it could have been, but I don't think Kyle meant that like we get input from this group and then we have to change the documents. Rather, like if another group shows up that develops a new security protocol, we need to update the document, but that doesn't happen tomorrow, right? So in this group, I think the status is that we collected all the information, we can freeze it, and then we move on, similar as we did it for the other documents that we already published.
Yeah, right. That's what I'd like to do. But if it turns out that one of the failure modes in working groups is that the chairs lose their interest in continuing to work on. Not the chair. Sorry.
The trick
authors.
comes out.
Yeah, sorry.
We're beyond that point already, right?
No, what's looking there.
Yeah. All right. I no point belaboring this issue. Does anybody object to basically we just let it be, and then when the other documents settle down, we go through and we last call them all? Is that what you were? No, you want last call now?
Yes.
Oh.
So, Tommy, Polly, I think we should do last call now. I don't think so. There's definitely a dependency of the core documents on this,
Yeah.
in the same way that there was a dependency of the core documents on MinSet as well as the original survey.
Yeah.
And the misref for MinSet is this document, right?
Yes, I think so.
It is.
Oh, yeah.
So essentially, this is holding
Yeah.
back MinSet.
Yeah.
This essentially belongs in the same article of work as MinSet and the original survey, as an earlier deliverable from the other documents.
Okay.
So I don't think there's anything that we need to add to this document.
Okay.
And having this document be a stable reference will be something that will help us be more confident in the other documents.
Okay. I'm persuaded. I also think that the value in the last call is going to come from the IETF last call, where we get new people to look at it, and so yeah. Okay.
Colin says +1.
To
Colin
what?
Perkins says +1 to Tommy.
To Tommy. Okay. Cool. All right, so that's what we'll do. We'll last call it. We'll start it like when we all get home. Is that all right with you?
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's fine. Fine. I think. So I think we're done with this chair's update. So how do I do this?
Oh, sorry, I'll do it. I'm trying to keep track of time here so that we know work. So do this. We close this window. Oh, that wasn't what I thought was going to happen. Yeah, I really screwed that up. Okay, in case people haven't figured this out, I'm having a rough morning.
Thank you.
And you have 20 minutes.
All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Yes, Brian. Okay. All right. I'm Tommy. So, what I want to talk about today is a discussion point. I'm going to have a proposal, but I'd love to hear any inputs on why that proposal may have issues, how we want to do it differently. So, when you read through the current documents, both in the architecture and the API, and I think also the implementation, it mentions heavily the notion of there's these framer things which take your streams and turn them into messages, and these are very convenient. However, I think when people have been reading this, myself included, and I think Aaron had done a review, it seems a little bit underspecified. It's not super clear how it exactly works. It seems like this magical element on the side that we just haven't quite gone around to specifying fully. And I think this is the right time to get concrete on it and make this a useful piece of work. So I want to first review what the existing text is around framers so we know kind of the state of the art as it is. So the definition that we have in the architecture is that a framer is a data translation layer that can be added into a connection and that defines how application level messages are transmitted over the transport protocol. And it says that it's particularly useful for things that are otherwise unstructured streams like TCP. So that also includes TLS. And the idea, and we've mentioned this before in some of our diagrams of saying you have your application on top of the TAPS API. It has a framer directly underneath it as the first thing it's sending and receiving from. And then below that are the other transport protocols. Hopefully we'll get beyond something like TCP one day. And then if we look at the interface document, there's actually a lot more text than this. I just stripped out kind of what the pseudocode ends up being. There are two different sections that define framers. They're not quite next to each other. One's in the sender side, one's in the receiver side. Currently, the way you add a framer to send on is that you add it to your pre-connection. So this is your set of parameters and properties that you create a connection from. You say frame with this framer, and then what that framer does is take data and then creates a just like a byte stream to output from that, presumably having added headers or done a transformation. And then the receiver side deframing for stream protocols, you give your pre-connection another deframer object, and then it takes random parts of a byte stream and outputs a message. There are problems if you tried to implement that directly. Exactly, right. So there's not a one-to-one mapping of how many messages you'll get out of an arbitrary section of byte stream. So it's not really possible to implement this correctly, but it gets the concept. It also, I think, is very specific that this is only over stream protocols, and that you add one framer onto your pre-connection. So what I want to try to do is come up with and see if we can agree on a slightly more nuanced definition of what a framer is. So this is kind of getting to the proposal area. So the first assertion I'm going to make is that a framer So in the architecture, we have a definition of a protocol stack, and these are the different elements of your transport protocol that are added into your connection, like TCP and TLS or QUIC and all these other things. So the first assertion is that a framer can be an element of a protocol stack. It can go alongside your transport protocol and be composed in that regard. And then try to be succinct in one sentence, but also be specific. What is a framer protocol? What is this element? It can be any protocol that operates on a single flow of data, so not multiplexing, not multipath, to package application messages with some direct transformation. And if you can do that, that's a framer. So by a direct transformation, that means you can add headers, you can potentially encode or encrypt, but overall there's kind of like a one-to-one correspondence between some range of bytes in the streams and what a message is. There's like a clear derivation step. You're not necessarily retransmitting or multiplying data out. It's just kind of like a one-to-one correspondence. So that's a proposal for how we define the constraints on what makes a certain protocol capable of being expressed as a framer. So I was trying to come up with like a matrix of like, what are the things that a full transport protocol can do and what are the things that a framer can do and how is this different? So there are certain things that all protocols hopefully should be able to do, like encapsulation. They can add some notion of headers or remove them. I think framers, if we look at how they're used, will need to be able to have some type of prologues or handshakes. This is fairly common as a way just to say, I'm beginning this stream of TLV frames, and here's just like my basic header on top. WebSockets is an example of like having you made just this little prologue handshake at the beginning, but it doesn't actually make it a reliable protocol or multiplexing. And it has some notion of you can encode the data. Some framers can just pass through application directly as clear text, but there are a lot that actually do some byte swapping to add some encoding to make it harder to read or whatever, but it effectively is still a one-to-one transformation. Yes, Jonathan.
Jonathan Maddox, staring at that, is TLS a framer?
Yes. So I will go into, I have a list of, yes. Yes, I have a list of what protocols are framers and which ones aren't. Yeah, sorry. So things that framer protocols, I believe if you do this, you should not be considered a framer because you will need to have more hooks and you're a transport protocol really. If you're adding your own layer of flow control, if you're adding congestion control, if you're adding reliability where there's not reliability, if you are multiplexing multiple streams, or if you're managing multiple flows out on a multipath network, you are not a framer. You are much cooler than that. But you cannot be expressed as a framer. Okay. So what are the examples? What could possibly be framers? So yes, I think you can express TLS, at least the basic TLS record layer is that. So things that are very obviously framers, like basic TLV protocols, like stuff like Radius do this. It's very simple that way. SIP uses like delimiters, WebSockets. Yes, Brian.
Go to the end of this, but I have a clarification question.
Okay.
Actually, no, I am going to give it. I am going to go ahead.
Please.
So, you say that a framing protocol is Radius a framing protocol, or is the TLV format that Radius uses the framing protocol? Is a delimiter a framing protocol, or is SIP a framing protocol, or is the part of SIP that handles the delimiters the framing protocol?
Yes, I think it'd probably be more accurate to say the part that does the encoding. So
right. Okay.
So you could be an app.
EG is
Yes. EG
Yeah, okay.
Radius format. I didn't have it right.
good. Okay.
Right. So essentially, if I am an application that is implementing SIP, my application is doing the SIP protocol, but I could potentially have the encoding of my messages be handled in a framer because it's a very one-to-one transformation. So if TLS wanted to have its record layer just use a basic framer, that's fine. Yeah, sorry. ESP, very simple transformation. Something else has to derive the keys for you, but if you have those as inputs, great. Similarly, even HTTP messages. So like the HTTP protocol and the way you use it is not a framer, but the way of encoding your messages into headers and bodies can be considered that. Things that are definitely not framers are TCP, SCTP, QUIC, and even things like H2, because they do multi-streaming, they have flow control, all these other things. So as far as the changes I'd propose to the document, and this is mainly in the API, I think our architecture is vague enough that things kind of work. Yay. Oh, yeah. Yes. Gory.
Gory first. Thank you. That was a good conclusion. Architecture is vague enough. Is Wireshark a framework?
Is Wireshark?
Okay, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
Yeah, because
Yes.
I think all the transport protocols have framers in them of some sort. It's just they might not actually make any sense on their own because they're intertwined like teeth.
Sure,
no,
sure, sure, yes.
I've just realised I'm drilling into something really big, and I'm going to go and sit down.
That's fine. So like if for some reason you wanted to really decompose your protocol, like for example, like HTTP2, I argue it's not a framework because it does multiplexing and it does flow control. However, the message formatting of headers to encode can be a framework. Everything is made up of these things. I don't think there's value in having people decompose them too much, but yeah.
Kyle Rose.
Yes.
So by one-to-one,
Yes.
that also includes transactions, I assume. So if you go back 2 slides, I think it's 2, and you have Prolog or Handshake there.
Yeah.
Prolog I buy because that's just like, hey, I'm signaling the start of something,
Yep.
right? But Handshake to me implies something that's two-way, and it seems like you don't want
Yes.
a framer to imply multiple transactions.
So so this is where the wording gets very nuanced. So the way I phrased it in this original sentence is that application messages have direct transformations. It doesn't mean that the framework doesn't generate control traffic of its own. It just means that every application message has to have a corresponding piece of bytes on the stream. There can be other unaccounted control pieces of data. For example, like if you have a WebSockets protocol, you could decide to not expose like the ping function all the way up to the application. You may want to, but if let's say you didn't, that effectively becomes a control message that belongs to the framework itself and does not become an application message.
So, clarifying question here: Philip Teasel, does this mean the framer shouldn't have state on its own, or does it mean?
Framers can be stateful. For example, let's say a framer has encoding state, like it's doing some sort of compression. That compression may be stateful between the two ends. Yeah, character encodings. Yeah. So, yes, Aaron.
I have some deep confusion on this.
Okay,
Right.
let's clarify.
So I thought the reason that you wanted framers were so that you could take stream protocols and you could run them over our message-based taps.
Correct.
One of the predicates of taps is that we would you want to be able to run it on one end system and not on the other end system, on the sender, not necessarily on the receiver.
Correct.
Right. So it's when I read the framer text, I thought this is something that that chops streams into frames and sticks them into taps messages, and then sends them to the other end, which and sends those chunks which get reassembled. Right.
The chunks go up to the application. The stream probably goes out to the network, to their end. Right.
No. The application one end is sending a stream to the application at the other end. Right.
Okay. So here's the example, right?
Some applications do, but if you're using TCP, maybe not.
All right. So
Can't they use taps?
yes. So okay.
And why do I have to stick this other protocol underneath? All I want to do is chop it and stick
No.
it into taps messages.
Okay. So here's the example. Okay. My server does not do taps. It will never do taps. Let's say it is a WebSocket server, which is essentially it's some application protocol that runs on top of TLS on top of TCP. Today, without framers, if I want to use taps to talk to the server, I create a taps connection that does an encrypted stream. Maybe it tries quick. It ends up using TLS. At that point, the burden is on the application to still use the stream and figure out all this other framing on top. This is saying that we allow the application to add in to its connection its definition of how to parse out the boundaries of these WebSocket messages, which the server, which is not using taps, is already sending. So the application only adds this when it knows what the application on the other side is. That doesn't mean they have to use this implementation, but So these are ways to take standardized protocols that are application protocols and
You're
drop them
exposing
in.
the application framing to the transport.
You are letting the application define its own application protocol and inform the transport of how it does the segmentation. So the transport, when it delivers messages back to the application, can deliver it more than just a raw byte stream.
Okay, so that's helpful. Did
Good.
not come through in the text. So
Well,
there's some.
in the current text in the documents.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Which is why I think we need to totally change it. Okay, I would. Would it be possible to just get through?
Oh, you want to actually
The slide?
start?
One of the things I wanted to say.
Okay,
But yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay. How many more slides do you have?
I have a quick counterpoint to your point, though, so I'd like to go to the line.
Okay.
Ted Hardy speaking. I think there's actually a quick counterpoint here. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things we want to consider is using TAPS for things like the DNS.
Mhm.
So you would actually have to instantiate the framer after the first few messages because of the way EDNS 0 works.
Yep.
So you'd have an initial framer followed by a successive
Yep.
framer once the messages come in and are passed up to the
And
application.
I'm going to talk about that.
Well, I think the way you just described it doesn't take that into account, and I'm quite concerned that you're adding the requirement for kind of in-exchange signaling that for something especially like if the DNS happens to be running over UDP is
Yep.
quite surprising.
So we have 5 minutes left on the agenda for this
Okay.
topic. We
So-
have some extra time at the end, so we can go a little bit over. But
Sure.
So
I would like to
Keep
get
in mind.
through
I will
this.
step back
that-
and keep standing.
Okay, great. That's fine. So-
You can't see the screen. Oh.
We know you're in queue.
that should suppress more questions.
So just to clarify,
We'll keep the queue.
so the changes I'd like to propose to the text. First, we currently have them be asymmetrical. I'd like to remove the ability to essentially define like you have one protocol that works bidirectionally. Of course, you can always have one direction be a no-op.
To be clear, when you say asymmetrically, you mean the fact that at a single endpoint, you can have a framer and a deframer, not that asymmetrically with respect to whether there's a framer on one side or the other, because I got tripped up on
Oh,
this.
sorry. Yes, I mean that currently in the text, you could set a framer but not a deframer.
Yeah.
Or
okay.
you could set
Yes.
you could set a different framer than a deframer. That doesn't make sense. Okay. So I think we should add the notion of a framer object that you implements both sides. We should allow it over any transport protocol. These need to work on top of UDP. I'm already using this on top of UDP. And we should allow the composition of multiple framers. They should be able to be composed potentially with other transport protocols in the stack. And I think we also need to be able to dynamically add them as we are learning about the state of the protocol. So I'll just breeze through this. You can look at the slides later. We have been doing implementation work around this and actually a lot of experimentation with how we can use this to improve our protocols. So essentially there are two halves. You have the things that the framer definition implements of how do I handle messages in and out, and the things that it, when it gets called with these, can do to inspect the message stream and move the stream state ahead. This we can go into in more detail potentially in the interim. I don't want to spend the time too much here. Here is example pseudocode about how you essentially implement a basic TLV protocol, and this is something that we would hopefully be able to import into the document. So a couple more extended points. There should be ways of annotating metadata about your framer when you're sending in and out. Like if you're doing HTTP and you want to send, here are my header values that you need to encode, there should be a way to do that. Even in the most basic form, if my protocol is TLV, I should be able to say, this is my T, and the LV, of course, are part of the normal send. So getting to the point of things like that are dynamic, so I've implemented like doing start TLS as a framer, and essentially it does this little handshake, and then based on that outcome can then modify the protocol stack. And so one of the problems with changing protocol stacks in general is that if your application on top has already started reading and writing, you may be in an inconsistent state and don't know what bytes have progressed. So by defining a framer in the stack, it is actually in a safe spot to do that. So you can say, it does your EDNS or whatever, it does some parsing and then decides based on that, cool, I need to add these other interpreters on top dynamically to do this. So they could add TLS dynamically into the stack, solves the problem. You don't have any worries about applications having already written data and being confused about the state. As we mentioned earlier, you could have control messages that get to be sent even if there is no application message, like pings and WebSockets. And then this does, of course, also need to be able to sort like partial messages, because you may have messages that come in fragments. And so even if the application at the top is only asking for atomic messages to be delivered to it, if the framer is getting in chunks, it needs to be able to essentially accumulate those chunks back into the connection. And that's all I have here, so we can discuss or we can move on.
Why don't we add 5 minutes to the agenda for discussion and then see where we are.
Right. So essentially, I'd like to see, can we come to consensus? We can talk about this more with issues and stuff. I'd like to create some PRs to get going on this.
Jonathan Lennox, not to bike shed what the outcome of this is, but I think this is now doing enough things that the word framer might be confusing and we need a new name.
That's great. I totally agree. I totally agree.
The other thing I would say is I would invert the way you do start TLS, which is to say I think that TLS itself should be exposed as a standard TAPS framer, which is to say the call to add a framer to this protocol stack, one of the things you can push on is TLS. I think that's a cleaner way to implement start TLS, and which implies that a framer can output a stream as well as a sequence of messages. But I guess that's the same thing. And
certainly, yeah, I mean that's possible. I think there's nothing preventing using these type of mechanisms like a definition of a framer in the implementation. For example, like we could implement WebSockets and TLS that way. There's also a distinction between what we expose to applications in the API that's not baked into like TLS. We should have a baked in option into TAPS because we want people to have security easily.
Oh, sure, but somebody who has to implement, an SMDP with start TLS, right, where you don't, it's not just you're doing a handshake. It's you don't know going in whether the other side will support start TLS precisely, or not. So
right, yeah.
We need somebody to help Kyle out in the room.
Okay. Can we get more note takers on the Etherpad?
Can somebody else get into the Etherpad and take some of these
Etherpad,
notes
no,
so that we don't lose these brilliant insights?
So first, I love this.
Thank you.
I have a few minor things. So if we go back to the table, what a framer can and can't do, I'm pretty much unsure whether you can prevent a framer from doing flow control, and whether you can prevent a framer from doing reliability and multiplexing. I think it shouldn't do that things.
Mm-hmm. So some of that gets into how we design the API. For example, in the current implementation that I've been playing with, if you have a message that the application is sending, I require you to act upon that message immediately and give me the output of what you would like to send as a result of it. There's not an opportunity for you to delay it or add back pressure or anything like that. So I understand your point, though, that people could abuse surfaces that are exposed.
So if you have a framer that has state, it can still store parts in its state and just send out a null message.
Yes. People can do whatever they want.
So,
yes.
But still, also some kind of multiplexing can be implemented with the framer. So if you have a multiplexing of some kind of special messages within the application, you can easily just So I think this makes it a little bit complicated how to put that.
This is a checklist of, is this the right choice for you? You can always make the wrong choice, but make good choices.
Okay, so
so I had to give you a shout out there. Okay.
Let's keep the line moving.
Yep.
If we're gonna bike shed on what this thing is called, I think we should call it the presentation layer. I'm not wrong. It makes me sad, but I'm not wrong. It's better than cascading policy sheets. So I'm fine with this. I think that this is a good arrangement I think you've split this problem out really nicely. Let's go back to your architecture definition.
Oh, yes. The original one?
No, the new one. The original one.
This one?
Yeah, this one. Brave New World. Yes, I like this.
Great.
Stick it in the architecture document. I think we can. I'm a little bit confused. Like, now can you go to your implementation? I'm a little, I mean, yeah. Is this Swift? Cool. No,
Ish.
ish.
I
Okay,
can
yeah,
share
no, right.
actual
Yeah.
later.
This seems perfectly reasonable so actually go back to your set of, this surface.
Yeah.
I'm not clear how much of this surface belongs in the interface document or in the implementation document, but these are details.
Yes.
I want to iterate on that. I want to actually say, let's try to come today to, is this okay? Does this make sense? Take this as a starting point and make that the focus of the interim.
Great.
Okay, so we're at the end of our 5 minutes for discussion. So let's take the last 2 comments very
I'd like
quickly.
to hear Ted.
Kyle Rose. So I think one of the things that's confusing me, and this goes back to what Philip was saying before, was
Sorry, I'm
it
cutting
seems
the
like
line.
with this,
The line's cut.
it seems like with this definition, you can basically create a transform between the wire protocol and whatever other protocol you want to use that is convenient for the application, right? I mean, in some sense, that's what you want to do, right?
Yes.
You want to make it so that it's easy for the application authors to implement their business logic and then transform it to whatever the wire protocol happens to be.
Correct.
Right. So what I'm hearing though is that one of the things that the framers could do, although maybe they shouldn't do, is insert multiple transactions that might involve blocking communication or additional asynchronous callbacks. Right.
Right.
Is that something that needs guidance that you want
We
to
should
avoid?
probably add some guidance, but the idea is that if the application itself is defining these, it's shooting itself in the foot if it is harming its own model. So I think
I'm not actually arguing that we shouldn't permit that. Like, I'm thinking that this could be really useful as a more generic.
I think, yes, but I think we should also give examples of where the benefit is very clear. For example, I take unicast DNS. Unicast DNS runs natively over UDP, but if we need to run it over DOT or DNS crypt or any of these things, the idea is that you would define a simple framer that you add in, that this is the transform that allows a DNS application unmodified that was written for the UDP API to just be able to go over DOT. No, Ted, tell me why I'm wrong.
So I think this topic is substantive enough. We'll give it more time. We'll figure out what's going to go on with the agenda. So let's keep the discussion going.
Hi. So Colin Perkins and Jabber, he's supportive of the concept. He'd love to bike shed names.
Great.
His comment is, in slide 11 about timers and framers runs the risk of opening up complexity, and we need to think carefully about the scope of the API.
I know.
Also,
That's
need to
what I put
make
up there.
sure the abstract API we design doesn't accidentally preclude zero copy implementations.
Correct. No, yeah, the efficiency of data copy is very important.
Tony, I really think that this, if you're going to take this to the interim, I think it's a great thing to take to the interim. If you go to slide 4, which describes what you say is kind of the architectural statement about defining framers, I think that there are cases where this is a great implementation strategy, and there are other implementation strategies that will work for other applications much better than this.
Yes.
And I actually think that there are some applications, and I think that DNS is sadly one of them, where you don't actually know what the actual wire format of what the real application message, here treating the DNS as an application, is going to look like until the first few parts of the exchange are finished. And so making them do a framer to do that, I think actually makes it harder for them to move to other, to treat TAPS as just a base transport. So I would actually suggest that in the interim, when you're thinking about this, you think about whether this is a structural part of the API or implementation advice for people who are going to run multiple applications over TAPS, because the answer you choose may be different depending on what you're optimizing.
Would you be able to just write up a quick paragraph and send to the list of the issues you see around DNS specifically in the transforms?
Will do.
Great. So yeah, that was just one example. Like, to give another example of something concretely that I know works, for like VPNs, if I have my IKE application, it has the same control message, whether it's over a direct UDP connection, if it has a 4-byte encapsulation header to be multiplexed with ESP, or to be put over a TCP socket. And so this is very simple to switch those out. That's one of the most basic cases.
So I don't have a solution for this yet, but I think we should also think about how to the choice of framers interacts to the protocol selection, because this can really be used to do, let's call it the translation layer between, for example, zip over SCTP or zip over UDP or zip over TCP.
Yes, correct. And so when we are racing different protocol stacks, the protocol stacks, the framer needs to be specific to the protocol stack it's in. It can be duplicated across them, but it needs to correlate directly to what is in there. Correct.
Yeah, but so we have to make clear that it really fits with the racing, and that we have an option to add, let's say, transport protocol specific framers for this kind of stuff.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's good advice to add in the text, in the same way that the TLV framer for IKE messages over TCP only needs to be added when you end up using TCP. Aaron.
So I think we've invented layering today, right?
Well, it was. It was already invented for us.
Well, yeah. So here we are adding an architectural concept that to me looks like, okay, you can layer one protocol on the other. Is UDP a framer?
Yes.
Is IP?
Yes.
So what is it?
No, that we are not going to ask applications to implement those themselves.
Why not? Maybe all I need is a demultiplexing layer, right? UDP would be fine. I mean, that's what we talked about in the
stack implements layers for you. That's TAPS v2.
I think that's an implementation detail. That's a detail of how. So I think we really need to clarify, and this is on us in the document too, the distinction between implementation details about how you build things that are composed, and what does an application need to be able to control of defining its own framing, and those are distinct.
Right. So I think that the discussion of frame, maybe I'm bike shedding the name here, but I think that sort of calling this framing is sort of is distracting from the problem that you're trying to solve, right? It's an adaptation layer from I'm still very confused about what the architectural invariant is that this concept is adding, right? That is different from me just being able to take whatever protocols I want and layer them. So what's the what's the thing that we're adding here that you can't do otherwise? Because we're talking about signaling between end to end and signaling between applications and the framer. And,
so those are all existing protocols, and we're not inventing protocols here. I think the thing that we're adding is, so if TAPS, the original goal of TAPS was to be able to do essentially racing or changing between protocol stacks, protocol stack agility. Again, as I'll take my example that I know I have working, I have my IKE application. It essentially has a mode in which it will try over UDP, it can fall back to UDP encapsulation, and then fall back to TCP encapsulation. Without the notion of a framer being available in the architecture, this fallback is essentially just three separate things that the application has to have completely separate code paths to handle. This allows us to have a transparent fallback, which is exactly what the original notion of TAPS was trying to solve. So it allows us to achieve that.
So this is built into the TAPS library. It
is built into the TAPS library in the API such that the application can specify, by the way, I can fall back to TCP and from UDP. And if I fall back to TCP from UDP, apply this transformation so I can still use messages. That is the intent.
Slightly less confused.
So we're quite over time. I'll cut the queue now because we have to go through the rest of the things. And that was, by the way, Aaron from the floor.
Yes, that was Aaron.
So Lars and Jabber, you're just reinventing Touch and Day's recursive network architecture.
Jonathan Lennox. So, two things, maybe three things. One is that sort of the fact that you can model lots of things in the stack as framers doesn't mean that doesn't mean that the implementation should expose them as framers. I mean, I don't think it makes sense for the to expose, hey, you can insert a UDP layer here. Conversely, there's things that might be an application might in the full TAPS 2 I want to be able to inject, like let's inject a web proxy here, which could not be modeled as a framer, and it's sort of harder to think about. The third thing, which is a more low-level implementation thing, I think you're going to need for the inserting or changing framers cases, the ability for the higher, the thing reading from a connection to be able to push back data it's already read, basically because, okay, I overread the end of my frame. I don't know what this next thing is, like switching from HTTP to WebSockets. And it occurs to me that might actually be a useful feature in general, given the TAPS property of, you can pass the data to be read to a different function. Basically say, okay, I read more than I need. This next thing belongs to the next guy. Let's push it back so the next guy can have it. I think that might be a useful feature.
That would be a good thing to discuss more in detail outside of this. Thank you. Okay, Corey.
Quickly, please. Okay. I stick with my very first comment in this session. The architecture was vague. That's good.
Yep.
I'm not convinced yet that we really should be digging into a lot of this. We may be better with something vague on framers because I don't know if we have a huge amount of implementation experience from different people, and we really, really should be putting this in the same document with the other stuff. We're making it complicated. So my pressure here is let's decide quickly how much of this stuff we want to appear in the API and the architecture. Implementation can have as much as we like.
Sure. I think it should be present, relatively minimal, but accurate. I would love to talk to the other implementations to start working on this. So we have spent last 6 months working on implementations of this. So I've now implemented, I don't know, like a dozen protocols over framers to get experience with the surface. So hopefully we can talk about when this is useful, how it can be useful, and what is the minimal set that we can define.
I would love to see that, and I would love to get this first document published soon.
Yes. Yeah, we're on track.
Michael Welzer. So some of this talk of reinvent the layering and all this, I think has to do with the way you phrased things here. So, one thing I'm wondering about, I mean, the first time I got a hiccup when I saw your slides, or the only time actually, was that slide when you said signaling is a part of a framer. Can we agree that this is something that's a matter of an application protocol? Application protocols can signal whatever they wish, but this is no concern to TAPS, because then all that's left is actual framing.
Yeah, let Brian answer.
I think that's my goal as well. Because if you do arbitrary signaling here, then it goes away from the original idea of, hey, we want to present something that's one-sided. The place where that doesn't work is when the signaling itself might change the arrangement of framers. So it's the start TLS question.
Yes.
Right. And I think, again, if you shoot yourself in the foot, it should hurt a little bit. I think that we don't want to be in a situation where we've designed a thing where it is very clear from the surface of the API that you are intended to do arbitrary signaling in the framer. I think that we need to make sure that we have just enough to handle cases that look like start TLS and EDNS 0.
Agreed.
And I think, so I think that we need to not lose sight of what the goal is. And I think that, so Michael will keep us honest.
Yeah. The balance is between the purity of the architecture and the practicality of getting these things useful.
Yes.
So I think we want the architecture and the design of the API to be very clear on here's the pure way of doing things, and just give you enough wiggle room to get the practical stuff done.
And can we go ahead and rip the timers out of the standards, just because those are scaring people.
That's fine.
Let's move on.
Thank you. This is
And
really useful.
at the interim, I think it would be great if there was some text that that sort of captured the discussion, and we can sort of feed that in.
We need to put sufficient amount of time during the interim, and let's move on. Philip. I think I was just short of 5 minutes. If you go through this one.
Yeah.
So I'd like to introduce another thing that I think might be needed to be added to the architecture, which is connection pools or connection pooling. Let me grab that one. So the basic idea is to introduce an alternate APIs interaction scheme for request response style applications like HTTP. So instead of just working on your streams or your messages, this really focuses on the message and abstracts more or less most of the transport semantics away. And we do this by combining several underlying transport connections into one pooled connection. So you don't, instead of saying, oh, I want to have a connection to an HTTP server, I just say, please connect me, please create me a pooled connection to an HTTP server. And whether this is one TCP connection, one quick connection, or a bunch of TCP connections that are used for to what head of line blocking is not the business of the application, but the business of the transport system. To do this, we have to live with automated initiation and teardown of additional underlying connections, at least for the HTTP case. And we need to have a way into the in the API to match requests and responses at the local side. So to make sure, for example, if we implement HTTP over this, just making sure that the HTTP reply goes with the same TCP connection than the original request was received. Why do I think that's something we might need in TAPS and not just a cool thing to add on? What convinced me about that we really might need this thing is what Tommy told us at the last session, which is how to do an interface for Quick. So I just have a small copy of Tommy's slides from Singapore, which might be unreadable, where he said we might have a stream mode that maps basically quick streams to TAPS connections. And we have this connection mode where we just use, like HTTP over Quick does, use streams as messages. And if we want to implement this for in the current version of TAPS, we have to decide for which one to go. And if we go for the left one, it's nice. It's a nice representation of TAPS, of Quick in TAPS. If we go for the right one, we end up with something that's really, really nice for HTTP3, but that's not generally usable. So by adding this second interaction mode, we can just say this is a regular connection and the other one is a pool connection. So we have actually implemented both nicely within TAPS without having to change too much of the overall architecture. If we think this through, what does it bring us? So first, it enables us to use the same API for HTTP 1, HTTP 2, and HTTP 3, as long as we assume that we can implement HTTP 2 in a framer or as part of the transport. But usually, you just open your pooled connections, send your HTTP request, and don't care over which version of HTTP is transported. It gives us automatic connection management for quick streams. It gives us a replacement for unbound UDP sockets, which are often used in server modes. So you just open a pooled connection and use the messages from that. Except if you look at the current mapping between UDP and TAPS, we end up with a new TAPS connection for each incoming new UDP peer. We might get a replacement for the one-to-many interface with SCDP. We get some kind that makes transparent connection migration not look awkward in TAPS. And we get per message path selection if we really want, which you can just stick as an option for sending a message and then letting the transport system decide which underlying transport connection to use for the individual message. So, and this is the reason why I really liked to have this pool connections or connection pools in TAPS. So I did a pull request on that where I get a lot of feedback, which was 295, that added a connection pool object, how to implement this. And as there was the request to merge it better with the connection, I did a second pull request as an alternative, 298, that just makes the selection property as a switch one, whether you want the connection to behave as a pooled connection or as a regular connection, and change the architecture in a way that allows a TAPS connection to represent multiple underlying connections. So, and I think the question for the working group now is this useful? Do we want to have this change? And later on, I can show some examples how this would look in pseudocode if we really wanted to.
Michael took some clarifying question. You have a connection pool. All transport connections belonging to that pool go to the SERM, to the same peer?
They go to the same endpoint as specified, which might mean a bunch of derived endpoints. So this can be a bunch of TCP connections to a bunch of CDN hosts serving the same content, but this can also just be one endpoint. This depends really on what you specified as an endpoint. If you say I want to connect to a certain host name on port 443, and this host name results to the bunch of different host names over a bunch of different interfaces, this can be all hidden into one connection pool.
And what is an HTTP one-to-many thing? Because you said it replaces it. I'm trying to get my...
So in the HTTP one-to-many case, it's you have to sync it from the server side, and you can just use...
What is an HTTP, the one-to-many thing you can replace?
I found it in the... I remember that there's such a thing in the HTTP API.
Yeah, it's a one-to-many style API, which means I have a single socket for multiple HTTP associations.
Yes.
So I have a single socket. It's like a unbound UDP socket.
Yes. So you can use this style of API for both use cases. One is from the server side, one's from the client.
Okay.
Hello, Tommy. So thank you for presenting this. Seeing it presented this way makes it clearer what you're proposing. My impression is that, one way that this can go is that it is a layer above TAPS. You could always have a pooling layer on top. But then if we have it in, I definitely prefer the second type of approach, in which is a property. I think I would even go a step further and say that rather than a property of the connection, it is a property essentially of the protocol that you end up selecting, that a certain protocol stack could have this in there. So I think actually most of the text around this, if we're discussing this, really belongs in implementation, because it is up to the protocol stack itself to define that when you get a message in, it can spread it amongst a pool of connections, and that's really an implementation detail. We may need something to communicate from the application that it is willing to allow its transport connection to end up being somewhat multifaceted. And I think the discussion we should have going forward is whether or not that is a generic property, what kind of specificity that property belongs on, or if it's even just kind of like a notion of the protocol that you're selecting itself.
We're at a point where we're going to have to start to shorten some of our later presentations if this
That's fine. You can
continues.
shorten mine.
Done.
I'll go through it in about 5 minutes, probably. So hi, Brian Dremel. Again, thanks for writing this up. Thanks for the presentation. I agree with pretty much everything Tommy said. There might have been some stuff right at the beginning that I wasn't listening to. I probably agree with that too. I really want to caution against, I don't think that putting this in the interface gives the application any control that it can't get through future transport properties that we might want to add. And I'm still not sure we want to expose that through transport properties. Pooling things on the client side as a reaction to a particular set of load balancer architectures that are currently prevalent and sticking that in an interface that we want to use for the next 15 to 20 years doesn't really seem like the best idea. So I was pretty sure that I was against this when it was first proposed. I was more sure that I was against it when text was proposed in the PR. And yeah, I don't think either of these are really necessary at the level of the API. That said, there are implementation techniques here that might be useful that could go into the implementation document.
Jonathan Lennox. I had one case that I was trying to figure out if this could model. Oh, sorry. One case that I was trying to figure out if this is something that can model or not, which is Turn, where I have one connection to a Turn server, but then I want to present that as multiple connections to my peers. Is that something? Is that this, or is that the inverse of this? I can't figure that out.
So my intuition would be it's the inverse of this.
Okay.
Eric Kinnear, just to keep it very brief. I like this. I like the ability to do something in this area. I think I would echo some of what Brian said in the sense that the interface here becomes a little bit trickier, and I'm not sure how that needs to be expressed. One concrete thing I might do is recognize that a lot of the things that determine whether or not connections can be pooled are things that we already know how to express. And so potentially the second PR here or something that's a derivative of it starts to get us closer to a common expression of here's how I'd like to get there. And if you already have something available, either create me one or give me the existing one, because all I really want to do is send this message and get this message back. And I don't really care beyond that.
Jake Holland. I agree with Brian and Tommy, but as regards to input, I think this idea becomes a lot more interesting in like output for what's currently going on when you look at the connections that have been established. And when so decoupling that sounds tricky. I don't want to try to do it here, but in terms of sort of visibility and understanding, as an application that needs to maybe feed information to network devices or something, like I think that something along this line becomes something worth thinking about. Thank you.
Ashu Singh. So the question is, does the connection pool also take into account things like if different streams have different congestion control and those kind of constraints? So is that wrapped into this, or is that not the part of the responsibility?
That's a really, really good question. I think the connection pool should enable the transport, or should just be a way of the application expressing that it hands over the mapping of messages to transports, and this control, it just wants this to be handed over to the transport layer, and the application doesn't care to implement this on their own. I think implementing this actually is a really complicated case, because it really goes into racing, it goes into path selection, it goes a little bit into flow control. So really implementing this connection pool with all features I mentioned here that are potentially possible is a really, really hard thing, and I'm not sure whether an implementation actually wants to do all of this. What I basically wanted to present here is the idea of having multiple connection pooled and just exposing their messages, and what's the potential of doing this. I'm not sure whether we want to go into everything on this list. I think if we
don't. We're out of time.
Yeah. So the basic thing is, if this PR might land, I'm really, really happy if it can do the first three.
Okay.
Quickly, Kyle.
Kyle Rosia, real quick. So the thought that I had when I first saw this was that this works really well for stateless uses of HTTP. When you're talking about state modifying uses of HTTP, such as, like delete or put or something like that, the ordering matters a lot. And maybe talking to the same server might matter a lot. So I think we just need to be clear, if we're going to implement something like this generically, that it should be for stateless purposes only. And then it will work with basically any kind of stateless protocol, not just HTTP.
Yes.
So, okay, so the editors of the architecture in the API document have said that they don't think this is a good idea. Are you taking that input, or do I need to take a hum in the room to see if there's a consensus on this?
I take this as an input, and yeah. So if you don't like the idea at all, just close the PRs.
Does that sound good to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so what the notes say, it's going to put something in implementation. Thank you, Philip. Okay, next is Brian. Yeah.
I realized as I was coming up here that I think this is the first IETF since like IETF 63 or 64 that I didn't prepare any slides for at all and only had one presentation using somebody else's slides. That's now you need to, yeah, then click on the X.
Sorry.
And then down at the bottom.
Thank you.
And then
I need
ETH
more, I need
implementation
more help.
report.
More help.
It's number
Brian.
5.
Thank you.
Click it.
Yep.
Now, like that thing. Yeah, cool. So this is actually work that was done by my last master student at ETH, Rehan, who appears to believe that SRE is a title, and will be joining us at Google, I think, next week to do site reliability engineering. Actually, can I get the clicker because we're going to go kind of quickly through this because I'm not going to do 23 slides. This is the BSD socket API. For those of you who are not familiar with it, you're in the wrong room. It's got problems. So this is basically, yeah, to be clear, this is, I'm using his thesis presentation slides, which is why I'm skipping over most of them because he had to do this as background. So he implemented TAPS in Go. And one of the things that he put underneath it was an entirely separate internet architecture called Spare6. So what he did, actually, this is not really about TAPS, but I do want to tell a story because it's awesome. He decided that he wanted to do something with path-aware networking and was told, well, it doesn't really work on the internet unless you're an ISP. So he became an LIR, joined RIPE, got an AS number, got a large, like, you know, your standard IPv6 thing, subdivided it into things that he could route on, and now he can do path selection via prefixes in IPv6. We didn't have enough time to do this in Panergy this time. We might see if he can come to Montreal. So yeah, the nice thing is that it has this network controller situation that actually will fit inside of a TAPS implementation when you're actually doing the path selection part of things, when you say. Now we get to the things that's actually relevant to this working group. So I showed him the TAPS interface document and like he came back the next meeting is like, do I really have to implement all of this? And it's like, yeah, just, you know, like, cause I'm going to select between TCP and Quick over, you know, Spare6 or not. And I'm not really going to make, if it's available, I'll use it. And if it's not available, I won't use it. None of the, you know, I don't really want to know what DCCP is in order to understand, or UDP Lite, why do I want to do, like, none of these were things for him. The second thing that he pushed back on pretty hard was, which was an assumption that we made, and we say in the interface document, well, we actually want your interface to look like this, but we also want it to look like the idioms in the language. And he was doing it in Go, and he really wanted it to look like net.con. And he really wanted it to look like net.con, because part of the thing that he was doing was implementing this up underneath the Golang built-in HTTP server, so he wanted to touch as few lines of code there as possible. So he ended up with a thing where he basically, so he has the property, the property specification, the capacity profile up here, and that just basically is a pointer to a thing that's empty because he's not going to use it to just select anything, but it's there because I told him he had to implement it. And then he has like basically, you know, credentials and then some information in fast open request and response is how he implemented the idempotent send, because we hadn't actually come to that yet. Like we were still hand waving on that part there. The connection interface, it basically is a net.con that has some transport properties attached to it. You can dial with this dialer, which is this thing back here, which is all of the stuff that has to happen in the first thing. So these could basically be the message context on the initiate with item, or initiate with send, or send with an, I forget what we called it. It was something better than item mode send. And then like, so here's your framer. And actually you can see here, Tommy, he's already done what you wanted to do. He's like, why are these two entry points? I'm just going to stick them in an object. And then you have this, you know, you can just send, you know, the message is an interface type, so it actually gets passed into this framer. You have your message properties. So this actually, you know, it starts to look a little bit like the interface. Here is something that's very Go specific. You receive, instead of saying, hey, I'm ready for one, it's like, here's a channel, just poke me there. I don't think he really did the pushback in the receive thing, but it turns out channels give you pushback. You get back pressure in channels automatically, right? So you get all of the properties that we want with an interface that is very TAPS inspired, but doesn't look exactly like what we put in the document. So what I wanted to come here and say, like this, the whole point of this is, I think there's links to the code in the presentation. If there aren't, I will ship them to the list. Have a look at this and see how, somebody who had never seen this before, with like a couple of hours of stuff and had to spend a whole lot of time actually going and creating an RIR or an LIR and building routers and stuff. Yeah, so there's some network service discovery. Where was the, oh, no. So, yeah, so this is a good illustration of basically what someone did with our documents and turned into an interface. And it looks very much like what we did, and we should spend a little time thinking about where the differences are, right? And I think really the thing that I took out of this was between the idioms of the language and the abstract interface, people are going to make the idioms of the language choices, and in some cases you end up with things with entirely different names. So good, that was my part.
How long did
Any
it take
questions?
him?
It was a 13-week. No, wait, hold on. No, it's a half year. It's a 6-month project, but he spent probably 4 or 5 weeks on the TAPS implementation part. One of the things that was really that he found was really he's good. One of the things that we found in doing that is that using the idioms of a language meant that forking the server that he wanted to write on top of this was like 3 lines of code, right? Like, so there's a big win for being able to do that.
Yeah.
So
Cool. Thanks. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Mr. Phillip. Oh, sorry. You're not Mr. Phillip. Did I get the name wrong? No, it's a joint thing. Okay.
We changed. So hi, I'm Max from. All right. Microphone. Hi, I'm Max from TU. Yeah. There you go. Hi, I'm Max from TU Berlin, and I'm going to talk about our implementation of TAPS in Python called PyTAPS. So we have some core principles while implementing. The first and foremost is that we are trying to stick as close as possible to the drafts, the interface draft, and particularly the point of the implementation is to see how well the specification translates to real world. We are also trying to integrate as much as possible with the potential that async.io provides. So we have a fully asynchronous API. All our functions aren't actually functions, but coroutines. That gives us a lot of advantages. Our current status is that we got TCP, UDP, and TLS all up to 1.3 all working. So you can send, receive, and so on. You can also choose which protocol is used by providing the appropriate properties, selection properties. So yeah. Next, we're going to see what we're going to implement in no particular order. Framers, interface selection, put connections, maybe quick and racing. Here's our minimal client and minimal server. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. It's on the GitHub if you're interested, but it's really close to what is actually specified in the drafts. Things we have noted that work well with the implementation notes down there. The API seems to be mostly easy and intuitive to use. It's really nice to use actually, and not really complicated. You can change and swap protocols without changing any or very little application code, and there's basically no protocol-specific code in the implementation. Now some things we have noted that might need some further clarification or explanation. The first is that the defaults seem to be unnecessarily restrictive. Right now, it's basically you default to TCP if you just use the defaults. And it's, to us, it seems like if an application doesn't specify any properties, we would assume that it doesn't care what protocols actually used or what protocol stack. So it should have the most options available to it and not and which allows the highest probability of actually getting a connection established. So why do we force TCP? Next, it's maybe a bit unnecessarily hard to specify a specific protocol. If the application already knows which protocol it wants to use, it has to do a whole lot of properties. For example, if it wants to change from the default to UDP, it has to at least change these 3 properties because, well, they are somehow interconnected, right? So I think Apple is doing that as well, that you have a way to specify a protocol directly instead of going over the properties, which makes the API harder to use. We also like the handling of unsatisfiable configurations is a bit unclear. It says in the draft to detect them as soon as possible, but it's never actually specified as soon as possible after what. From our perspective, it would make sense to do it after initiate or listen has been called, because before that it doesn't, it makes no sense. Right, but that should be made clear. Also, it's a bit, right now, the application can't really tell whether there's a problem with the configuration or a network problem, because both throw an initiate error. And I think, we think that's 2 very vastly different things. So maybe there should be an own error type for invalid configurations. Also, there's some properties are really hard to tell, like, on some protocols, it's hard to tell which properties they actually satisfy and which not. For example, does UDP satisfy 0 RTT or not? That's maybe should be specified for the protocols that exist somewhere, which they actually satisfy and not. Also, what do you do if a protocol has some optional properties? For example, STTP with multi-streaming, what do you do with them? Do you just, if the application says prohibit multi-stream, do you just throw out SCTP, or do you try to turn it off? But then what happens if you can't reliably turn it off, if the remote issues a new stream and stuff like that? It's also not really specified. Then some miscellaneous minor stuff. What happens if there's multiple receives queued with different min incomplete lengths? For example, if you queue 1 receive with min incomplete length 20 and then 1 receive with min incomplete length 1, and then you get 10 bytes, 10 bytes arrive, do you wait until the first receive is satisfied, or do you just satisfy the second receive? That's, as far as I could tell, not really specified either. The second thing is like a minor thing that it's maybe a bit inconvenient to always have to queue receive calls if you are some application that just wants to get all the data anyway and doesn't really want to just queue receive calls. And finally, message ref gets mentioned in the interface draft as something the send, so the send callback as a parameter, but it's never actually specified what that is or where it comes from. All right, that's it.
We got a few minutes for questions.
Cool. Hello, Tom Jones. 3 things. So we saw you wanted to call a direct protocol thing in NEAT as well. I think it's common. I don't know if it's just UDP that is weird like that, or if other protocols you actually want. Did you read the implementation draft? Did it help?
Yes, I read it. It helped. Yeah.
Okay. Are you going to feed back some of this? Please feed back.
Yeah,
some
sure.
Cool. And so you had a timeline and a to-do list for stuff to do. Do you have time to work on this? I mean, is it just another hackathon, or are you going to work between then and now?
No, well, I have 10 hours a week. I'm from the TU, so I have 10 hours a week, and we might get some more people. So
that's lots of time. That sounds great. Thanks.
Hello, Tommy. Thank you for doing this. It's really good to see other implementations. Just a couple comments. Were you going to talk about the Python stuff? Okay. One thing, to Brian's point earlier with kind of like the language idioms, it'd be interesting to see, are there more Pythonic specific idioms that we could introduce, and how would that change the surface, just to kind of explore that space?
Right. For example, one thing I didn't mention, but for example, that you can't, like the pre-connection can't immutable, right? It's really hard to do in Python because you don't have any privates. So basically, the application can always, if it really wants to change things around. So that's one of the things we've noticed so far.
So that'd be good to know. When we're talking about what to do next, if you guys do framers, because that's a interesting topic for the next interim, I'd be really fascinated to see experience with that, and we can chat there.
Yeah.
And then I would also ask, all the bullet points you had later on, if you could actually just open an issue for each of those on the GitHub. I think a lot of them do have good answers. Like looking through them, and I was like, oh yeah, it's this, but it's just not specified clearly. So these can become editorial changes to clarify.
All right.
Yep, Eric Kinnear. I think we'd taken a look during some of the hackathon at some of the more details of this, so I wanted to say I think it looks really good, and thank you for doing it. One comment I had on the kind of, do we specify properties or do we specify protocols themselves? I think the rest of the world has specified protocols themselves for properties that they want. And so kind of what you ran into is it's very common that somebody trying to use this is going to end up having to specify a protocol themselves. But I would argue that that's something you could do as a kind of convenience thing that then sets the underlying thing, such that the internal implementation is simply looking at the properties of those protocols and isn't trying to do something like that. So you have not a layer on top, but you have a grouping of, if I say I want UDP, yes, sure, there's 3 different things that sets, but that's just a convenience for the user.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Max. Okay, Jake. We're actually back on time here, Jake, so I didn't have to take any time away from you. So I was very surprised to see Yang arrived in TAPS. So
yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so I'm Jake Holland. Thank you. I started looking at TAPS because I want multicast to work. And we had some of this on the list. And so before I thought I could make multicast work, I thought I had to like do something because I couldn't understand the interface draft, right? So what I'm really looking at is trying to make a thing that I'm confident I know what we're talking about. And yeah, so the basic idea now, anybody who has looked at the Yang draft, please ignore it. There's already been some bike shedding in like dinner meetings and stuff, and that's great, and we need to do it. But you know, there's clearly there need to be some changes, and I think there's good consensus on that. But the basic idea I'm looking at here is we've got the examples I think are the most useful part of this exercise for implementers and users. And the idea is that you can like copy and paste them and make them go into your thing that you're trying to run. Okay. And then I also, you know, the way I'm doing the build is a little bit odd. I hacked it together in half a day. If anybody wants to improve it, that would be lovely. But it's, I'm actually running it through libyang to parse the model and also running the examples to validate against the model that has been parsed, so that everything that's in there is like already sort of checked. And I think that idea is another useful way to be developing this in a way that's a little more like developing code, right? So because that's where it has to get to, and that's kind of the goal I'm looking at, right? So this summarizes some discussion on the list essentially. The general idea is that the reason it's useful is you get a config format, and the config format is useful because you can paste it across different implementations, one in Python, one in C. You can do it on the server and the client. Maybe you can do all kinds of stuff. You can generate some test suites that you can run against all the different implementations, and you can check what's going on. And the implementations now, the internet draft itself can sort of become an upstream for like you're trying to implement it and you have some problems and you say, well, but if it was this way, then this would fit more cleanly. And so you can just make that patch and you can be running it and you can say, what do you think about this, guys? Here's the problem I ran into and why, and here's what I think we could do about it, and here's what it ends up looking like instead. And that's just a nicer sort of path to me than trying to read those documents that are a little, you know, I mean, they're lovely, they're great, but they're hard to write into code, you know? So the other thing about using, that's generally for any kind of a config any kind of config thing, right? But for Yang in particular, we get some tool support. There's already some API generation stuff for like Java. And I think the same thing can happen in C and C++ and Python and whatever. A lot of space here for making products out of it, or, you know, doing like sicken your grad students on it and stuff. And when it's producing state output for what's been established, this also can feed back into tools that are upstream, right? The tools, things like router config for software software-defined network, and these kinds of things are using Yang already, right? So the like it's not specified, but the general idea here is that you can, by coming up with something that is already in the right format to pass on, you get some value out of the existing kind of tool ecosystem, right? That's what I'm looking for here. And there's all these existing models that have a bunch of work done, right? So the interface types, there's this giant list of them. And if you want to be able to select interface types, then you have to, just be able to import that. And then when somebody makes a new one, you don't have to update your draft, you update the other draft, and you're already importing it. And so it's fine. So yeah, these are the questions for the working group. Do we want this? And what do we do with it? And do I really have to own it? Or can I throw it over the wall to somebody and just kind of help?
Nice try.
Hi. Right. That's like it was a drive-by yanging, right? Hi, Brian Trammell, stand-up comedian. I'll be here for another couple of minutes. So you had me, like, I was like all ready to buy this until you said you can generate Java code out of it, and then I was gonna run screaming.
No. You can write something else.
Yeah, I know. That was a joke. This is not. I think this is really cool. I think there are it opens up many avenues for confusion, which is good because we're good at confusing ourselves in this working group. Because Yang is sort of really well known in the IETF as a data model for things that have to do with configuration. And this is the first attempt to take it and say, well, it's actually, we're looking at a configuration and there are these other entry points for doing things that are not really, I mean, yeah, you can say, well, we're going to change the state of this set of connections by sending a message on it, right?
So that is also there in Yang. It's less.
Yeah,
sort of,
right. So there's what you can do with it, and there's what people think it's good for. And I'm afraid that like doing this. So this is not a reason not to do it. This is like something. If we take this on as a working group, we need to understand that like on Sunday we're going to have to explain to people that we're not using Yang for that. At the reception, it's like, oh, you guys are configuring APIs. That's awesome. No, it's not what we're doing. Because that was my first reaction when I saw the message come across. I'm like,
well,
why?
We're configuring connections.
Yeah. Okay, if you want me to like it, you need to stop describing it in those terms. So the big win. So like I'm the inventor of the notation that we use in the interface document, and I hate it because it was like I needed some way to say it that looks kind of codey, and it looks codey, but it's like it has it just right. This I think is worth the effort. The question is, so you want to take this document and throw it over the wall, which you're not going to be allowed to do.
I'm willing to help.
Okay, it'll bounce. Don't say bounce. I've been dealing with SMTP all morning. It's more useful, I think, as an appendix to the interface draft.
Sure, that'd be great.
Because I mean, if we're going to do this, if we're going to say that like a good way to verify this is to verify the interface is in Yang, then the Yang should be in the interface draft. Because otherwise, it's like here's this sidecar document that's out of sync with the other thing, and you get to choose which one you want to pay attention to is a bad way to go forward. As an editor of the interface draft, I am amenable to bringing that into the interface draft. I don't know what the other editor has to say. Is he in line? Not yet. Yeah, I think we should definitely think about this going forward. I need to take a look. I have not had a chance to install the Yang toolchain on my Corp laptop, which is going to be fun.
The Make tries to do that, so
yeah. So I'll definitely have a look at this, but I think that yes, this is definitely worth thinking about doing, and the right way to do it is appendix interface.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Tommy. So thank you for doing this. I think it's really good. I think it's quite timely as well as we are, maturing these documents to make things very serious about how we have rigor in it. I think that's the key observation I get out of this beyond Yang is the rigor.
Yeah,
that we
thank Aaron for that. He
Thank you,
encouraged
Aaron.
people to look at it. Yep.
Right. So I think that is very valuable. I don't have a lot of experience with Yang, so I don't know.
Me neither, actually.
Is Yang the right compiled rigor model for this? I don't know. When we talk about as a working group, what can we do with this work? I could see it going a couple ways. So we could have a document that's a Yang model. We could have an appendix. Again, it may be a little odd or raise questions of like, how am I supposed to use this? The thing that I would love to figure out if we can do and kind of make a proposal out of this is have an item that's not necessarily a document output primarily. Maybe it also gets reflected in a document, but is essentially something that we can define maybe on the GitHub, put this up into our working group GitHub, and essentially have like a conformance test for the API so that require that implementations will learn how to ingest something that can be created by this and essentially can be run through steps of, if you get this, you're supposed to try between these options and essentially just do a sanity check of,
yes.
Does your API allow you to express these things and do something reasonable with them?
Yeah, as like another new document, conformance test.
Oh, I mean, I don't know if it's a document. Like before we talk about documents, like just get like a tool chain on the Git that like all these, we have Neat, we have our implementation, we have the Python one, we have the Go one, and just be able to teach them how to ingest something here and see what they do, and like build up a tool chain first, and then maybe later we document it as an RFC or as an individual draft. But let's focus on the test.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Michael Scharf, and I'm speaking here as somebody who has 3 years of experience talking about Yang to application developers. And there is certainly a value in looking into Yang, but I will give you one observation, that if you talk to application developers, none of them is aware of Yang, because Yang is a very special purpose modeling language, specifically for modeling configuration and operational state. And if that's the problem to be solved, Yang is perfect. If the problem to be solved, yeah, it's at least good. Let's put it that way. If the problem is something else, specifically if the problem is to model an API, then Yang can be used, but it is by far not the only solution in there, and it is certainly the solution that no guy in the IT industry will ever know. And the whole tooling, there's a lot of tooling, there's a lot of code auto generation tooling, not only for Java, there's a lot out there, but we have to be aware the tooling is very specific for modeling or controlling configuration and operational state on network elements and not on end systems. And that means that the tooling that is out there, it can do useful things, specifically if you think about network elements. But the key question is, is this the relevant use case for TAPS? My personal take is I can see this coming. I can see TAPS becoming relevant in use cases where Yang is relevant as of today. But to me, Yang is not the natural choice right from the start. So I would at least suggest to the working group, think about other alternatives and make an informed call whether Yang is the right one, because I could also see other solutions out there, other data modeling languages that are at least as good as Yang for the typical TAPS use case, in my opinion.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I'd love to hear. Yeah.
So this is not a model for the interface. It's a model for a flow configuration or a connection configuration. Like, what's the properties you need for a connection? It's not for the whole interface. That would be crazy.
Yeah, so this is something you feed into the interface is my intent with this, to configure the connection. But your point is very well taken, and thank you. If there is an alternate that's better, then yes, we should use that. And I would like to be more informed on that. So if you have suggestions, then yeah, please.
For example, Swagger is widely used for if you want to have a REST API, which is also pretty common to configure software, for example, because at the end of the day, what I'm hearing is you want to configure software. You want to configure something in the stack. And there are many ways how you can configure something in a stack. Yeah. And Yang is the one that you would use if it's a network element. If it's running on a PC, nobody is really using Yang for that right now. It might come, but
All right.
As I
well,
said,
no,
my suggestion is make an informed choice. Clearly, I can see yang, but make an informed choice and look at alternatives.
Great. Thank you.
So, Gori Fairhurst, thank you for the rigor and what this has exposed. That's been extremely useful. I'd just say +1 on concerns about putting this in one of our other documents as an appendix, because it kind of leads people to think that's what you're really about. And I don't think this is what we're really about. So I'd much rather it as a separate document if we publish it as a document, because then we say, oh, it's an informational document. This isn't what TAPS is about, but it's about TAPS. And there's a subtle difference there, but I think it's important we don't embed yang as part of TAPS by accident, simply because we include an appendix that describes yang. It's a presentation question, really. I vote for a separate draft, in other words, if I was asked to vote.
So the thing I hate about separate drafts is that they're hard to keep synced, and I can't reference the draft while it's a draft, and it's like, I don't know how I'm going to do that, but yeah.
If the working group wants to do it, we can publish the two at the same time and make sure they go through as a pair. I'm okay with this even. I'm not saying we have to wait a long time to do this. If it's ready, then it's ready. But we have to keep it.
Thank you. We should discuss it more. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, cool. So the thing I really like here is the idea about having an easy way to share properties for a connection than, like you said, to test your stuff on another system or whatever. That's a really cool idea. We should keep that in mind. But it's also something that you can just do on top of TAPS, right? But because what you're doing is like you pass the yang configuration and then you use the TAPS interface to actually do it, right? So it's really something separate we can do later on. The value of having it right now is actually to double check if like what we assume works with that model, and that's very valuable. I don't see a document here right now.
Okay, thanks.
So let me see if I'm summarizing what I hear as the consensus of the room is that there's general agreement that this is a useful tool for sort of the engineering process that we're in now of helping TAPS evolve. And there's some concern about possibly confusing people more if this becomes our primary way of expressing the mechanisms of TAPS. Your points are good, although your concerns are good, but the weighting would vary depending on whether this is a long-term coexistence or a short-term coexistence.
Right, and also it's what I want is this as an implementer. As an architect, maybe I don't, right? But as an implementer, yeah, I want good, solid something I can work on.
Right? But if there was, so I thought that Michael's point's a good one, is that maybe there are better choices.
There might be better choices. That's great. Yeah.
This is Tommy. So just to the point of keeping things in sync, one of the great things now that we have a GitHub, that's the working group's GitHub. If this is another document, every time you do a commit on the repo for the AP, if we change the interface, we'll say you have to change the model too. And even if this is not a document, what I'd like to see really is let's use some rigorous model. Maybe it's Yang, maybe it's something else that has been suggested. And if we make changes to the interface document that change the number of properties there, we in the same commit make the change to the conformance test such that we make sure we're always in sync and that our implementations have to be adapted to it.
Perfect. Yep.
So who's going to look at other tools? Does anybody want to spend some time on that? Is that you want to?
That's those guys. So last one.
Is there anybody else who wants to work with Jake on this, or are we going to just? I mean, because I think that this is a topic we can revisit at the interim, right? Somebody's got to go do a little bit of homework, but. Did he have a suggestion? You did mention one tool, but I didn't hear the name. Michael, what was the tool?
Swig? SWIG? Is that the one I heard? Or I wasn't sure either.
You can send it to the list or whatever. Oh, here we go.
I can try to send something to the list. Maybe the best way is to send something to the list. What I'm aware of, it's not specifically for this use case here, but as I said, that there is other tools out there. And as I said, at least look at it and make your own choices.
Yeah. The fact that everybody in the room is scratching their head is a sign that this is not an expertise that we have. So, what?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
thank you,
just
Michael.
reached for the tool that I saw first, and I really just want it to be some kind of tool. Yeah.
Okay, so getting your other slide deck up.
Okay.
Yang. All right.
Okay. I'm going to go over the problem I'm really trying to solve, and for this, sorry.
Oh, sure. If I can figure. Oh, there's a button. There we go.
All right. So first, let me briefly describe my hackathon projects for the last two times. I know some of you aren't as into multicast as I am. So the basic idea is to have a multicast enabled network which ingests over a unicast tunnel that it automatically discovered multicast traffic based on the requests of clients that are within that multicast network, a join that got propagated through the multicast network. So these are the devices I brought to the hackathon. There's a border gateway, and Dryad is a new spec that's been adopted by MBOND and has been working through. I'm getting close to last call. I have like a deployed DNS zone that implements this and an implementation that runs it, and it's coming along. What I brought, so that was I set up in Bangkok, and then this one in Prague, I brought along a home router, and so there's this problem where I'm going to set up an automatic unicast tunnel. I have a client that wants to do a join, and the join is going to be going over Wi-Fi some of the time. And so what I'm going to need to do, because there's other different problems with multicast over Wi-Fi. So what I do is I need to find a local way to set up a unicast connection and make it so that the unicast connection then propagates that multicast join. It goes through the multicast enabled network and then makes another different unicast connection at the ingest of the network. That's the goal. Now, if I don't have that local thing, or if I don't, or more precisely, if I don't have the multicast enabled network, then the client still is going to use this same path. Like that's just a network that's lower down, right? He's on the client. So he's going to use the same path to ingest multicast traffic as unicast. But it's very important that I find the local one, if there is a local one, and use that by preference so that the multicast enabled network actually gains benefit from being a multicast enabled network rather than being tunneled across as unicast. That's the idea. So the draft goes through the way that you do the discovery and the way that you do the discovery on the other side. And so this is why TAPS is interesting, right? We have a similar kind of problem as the connection racing. There's these multiple paths. You got to figure out what's going on. You got to try different things and see how it works. And so not only that, but there's selections on interface property filters, such as, whether it's Wi-Fi or not, and whether it's going to have multicast problems or not. And the pre-connection already has both the local and the remote endpoint, which was super useful because like the bind in the socket only has the group address, and by the time I got to the point where I was trying to coerce the netlink socket into setting a route just for my application to be on the interface that I wanted, I realized this is not the application developer's problem that I'm treating it as. So, regarding the multicast API itself, this must regards what's going to have to be in the document, not a must that would be itself in the document. But I think that it has, and I can go through this if there's any questions. I have 2 backup slides that can speak to this question. But the main thing is that SSM and ASM, by which I mean source specific multicast and any source multicast, have like different networking semantics, and so even the same traffic can be treated in different ways by different networks, and so you have to be able to address it in the way that you mean to address it, and in the way the network is going to be able to treat it. And then the other thing is that the tunnel discovery needs to have a good default, and it also needs to have like be able to control it in much the same way that you need to be able to form a connection through some other proxy that's remote that you're already like grappling with very effectively under the TAPS thing. Other than that, I think, I'm not certain, but I think it's quite low impact on the TAPS API itself. And yeah, so I talked to the core team of editors on whatever day it was, Monday or Tuesday. And I got myself the issue assigned, and I want to like put in an implementation and try and run it, right? That's what I'm looking at next. Yeah, I just need Yang, that's all.
Gori, first, not talking about Yang. Do you need source filters? Because you do ASM and SSM, but there's a kind of intermediate bit.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I don't know for sure. I think I do need SG joins, but do I need the full source filter? I hope not.
Okay.
If anybody comes to me with a real use case that can't be done as SG joins, then maybe, but I hope not. I don't have that use case, so I'm hoping not.
Do you need TTL and sender?
Yes.
Okay. I'll happily look at this. I'm interested.
There. Thank you.
Hi, this is Tommy. So thank you for doing this. Can we go back a slide? Yeah, cool. So as a question for the SSM versus ASM, this is a property that belongs where? So we have the notion of like message property. So you give like a property on the receive, or is this really a property? Could it be a property of like the endpoint that like if I want to essentially have a multicast connection, do I want to specify that when I receive on this connection, I want this one to be my SSM and this one to be my ASM? Or where do you envision that property being?
So the receiver needs to be able to set it as part of its join.
Okay, so it's essentially on the time that I join or essentially establish the connection, the object upon which I can receive data, that will be specified as one of the properties.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Do you have an opinion on adopting the work?
There's no work yet.
I think we need to add it to the core docs. It's not a new piece of work.
The scope.
Yeah, I think it is in scope, I believe. We've discussed it from the beginning, have been punting it. This is one of the areas that for our implementation, like I want to get to like next. So I think it's
awesome. I have
useful
some feedback for your implementation.
Great, great, okay, cool. So I'll want to discuss that with you more.
Hi, Brian Trammell. I just actually realized the genius of Aaron's joke of putting the multicast talk last, because the joke is as soon as you say multicast, then the meeting is over, and we say multicast, and now the meeting is over. So 150, like I said, we had this as a requirement, and we've been punting it for a while. We actually had as a requirement, and so had some preliminary design for it in post sockets as well. I don't know what the other, like what was in Neat. Our multicast was kind of very naive. It's like, hey, it's like the code lab that you do when you learn how to do multicast in undergrad, right? I think it seems very much to me like we originally thought this it could be kind of, an alternate set of APIs into a connection. And it seems to me like this is a different kind of thing. So I think we need to go back and look at the description of the problem in 150, and we need to actually iterate on that a couple of times to say what we think the shape of that should be. But it's not like, hey, this is a connection that smells slightly different. It's a different sort of thing.
Yes, that is quite likely. So reading TAPS, part of why it's hard to understand how to fit this in, right? Yeah, is I think what you're speaking to, and that What I want is to make sure I can do UDP.
Yep.
I understand and agree that like in the TAP scope, like, yeah, at some point we probably should make an extension that does like flute and norm and
Right.
some of these other things, RTP maybe.
UDP
But
first.
UDP first, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Hi, Max Franke. Just real quick for the implementation, I had a short look because I knew this was coming. The async.io does support multicast pretty much out of the box, so I think it's possible to implement it pretty easily in our.
Thank you. Great.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll start typing. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. So before we break, this is the end of the agenda. Can folks get out their calendars and maybe we try to agree on a date for an interim, or maybe at least a week or something? So if we're gonna do is a virtual, yeah. So there's a we're gonna try to rev the docs by then. Is that right? Do you guys have changes that you think we can either develop the topics and talk about things, or we can rev the docs. So the things that we talked about were stuff on the agenda, right? It was framing, Yang and its substitutes. I'm not sure. Is there anything else? Maybe, so, Philip we talked about maybe putting some stuff on connection pools into the implementation document. Maybe we can review that.
I think more broadly, implementation document direction and how we want to structure the document needs to be in there.
So, okay. So do we want to have a rev of that document before we meet so we can talk about it?
I have a question to Gory, who had suggested revving the doc again. To clarify, are you imagining that we will rev the document before the interim to have something to discuss at the interim, or do we essentially want to create PRs, have the interim, and then as a result of the interim merge them and
rev the doc,
like the week after create?
That's the question that I'm trying to say, yes.
Jonathan Lennox said it. Both is good. My plea was for after. The people in the IETF working group saw something complete as an ID. But both is good, right? I mean, if we can just put them in and then maybe type them and then reproduce it. In
Both
a few weeks.
is good if there are changes that can be made that don't require the interim meeting to have the discussion first. So, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. It's like, do you guys have stuff that there's been a bunch of flurry of activity on GitHub. So I'm presuming that will result in some changes to the document. But the reason that I'm asking this question is I'm trying to figure out, do we need to add time to do a document rev before we have it? Like, should we do this in April or May? I guess that's the question. Right. If you're going to rev the document, I'd say May, right? Give time for the document. But if we're not, let's do it in April, and then you've got that much more time for to rev the document afterwards. So, but everybody said May, so we'll go with May. Okay. I'm sorry. Mid-May, week of May 13th. I think we did Brian is.
The IAB is going to be in Reykjavik toward the end of that week, so I prefer to have it at the beginning of the week.
At the beginning of May 13th? So you're free that week, but at the beginning?
I'm free on Monday and Tuesday,
Monday
and
and
Wednesday
Tuesday.
morning.
Wednesday morning? Monday, May 13th. Any objections?
Sorry, Colin Perkins in Jabber, he would prefer to avoid that week.
Okay. Monday, May 6th. Okay, I think we. All right.
So you want these ones?
We're looking at this thing. At this point, we're looking for hard nose. And I think we did last time we did like 11 o'clock Eastern, which is 4 o'clock CET for a start time. Do we have anybody in Asia who's participating? I don't think so. Was it 1 o'clock? 1 o'clock and 6 o'clock CET? Do you have a preference? Monday. We're talking about Monday, May 6th. So I prefer not to force the Europeans to work into the evening if we can. So how about 11 a.m. Eastern U.S. time on Monday, May 6th? 2-hour block. $11 Eastern. Oh, right. That's okay. I knew there was a reason. Is that doable? Yeah, Eric? Yeah. Okay. Anybody else on the West Coast want to? Jake, you going to veto 8 a.m.? All right.
What is that?
Okay. Why does it only show me all day? Okay. Taps. Interim. 11 a.m.
So just from Jabber, Kevin Smith says May 6th is a UK bank holiday. Is it the same in the EU? It's like the May Day holiday in the UK.
Corey?
I mean, Colin said nothing.
Tom?
I'm busy, but also.
But no one's objected to, before we move, no one's objected to the 6th yet. Is that 8th? Okay, so we're talking Wednesday the 8th, same time. Any objections? Okay, I will send 2 hours. Less is unrealistic, more isn't fair, so.
Aaron?
Yes.
I know it's important that you get the document editors and the active people in here, but other people can join this, can't they?
Oh, yes, totally open. Right, this is an open IETF meeting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know,
But the
the
agendas-
stakeholders, it's
yeah.
so much faster to converge in the room, right? So if we have stakeholders, right, who are completely blocked, I'm happy to revisit it. It looks like that week is in general not a problem, with the exception of a possible bank holiday on Monday. So I think we can move it around if we need to. Okay, then I think we're done. Thank you, everybody. We will see you in Montreal and online first. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Good choices.
Thanks to everyone who helped out with the notes.
Also a good choice. I mean, it's a good choice. They're saying we shouldn't implement package sniffing framework for taps.
I think we can leave it in here. There's a folder here. You just put it in the right slot in the folder, and they come and pick up the best.
I mean, you know, for other purposes, it's not terrible. Like, I want to see what's going on for TLS stack.
Just give it there.
It was